Hello and welcome back to Nunley Math. I'm your host, Aaron Nunley. Thank you so much for joining me here today for lesson 2 of our Exponents and Scientific Notations unit. Our last video was a little bit of a long video where we introduced the idea of exponents again, and we talked about some of the things that we can do with that. We looked at some different forms of exponent problems and kind of how they might look if they appeared in a math test or a math textbook. Today we're going to zero in specifically on areas that students tend to struggle with, spend a little bit of time just making sure we have those concepts really nailed down, because in our next video we're going to start dealing with exponents that are zeros or negatives. Some really cool stuff happens when we have zero and negative exponents, so we want to make sure that you come back for that, okay? For today, this is going to be pretty quick. It's just a couple quick slides, refreshers on things that might be a little bit challenging. You'll notice that I have our 3-column table here again, and this time I have a fraction to the third power. In this case, 1/4 to the third power. Remember, our exponent tells us how many times to take the base, in this case 1/4, times itself. 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4, and just to make sure that we have it fresh in our memory, I've put our multiplication of fractions rules over here on the right again. We're going to multiply straight across the numerator, straight across the denominator to get our solution. So 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64, and you end up with the fraction 1/64. Hopefully that's familiar to you at this point. I would highly recommend that you pause the video, try the second one on your own. I'm going to go ahead and do it for those of you that don't care to do it, or those of you that have already paused and taken care of that. Since I have an exponent of 4, I've got 3/5 times 3/5 times 3/5 times 3/5. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81 on top. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 across the bottom, that's 25, times 5 is 125, times 5 is 625. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Notice we now have a negative fraction, but the negative sign is inside the parentheses, and it is to the second power. So it's -2/7 times -2/7. -2 times -2 is 4. 7 times 7 is 49. You get 4 49ths. Notice that when you have a negative base, like in this case -2/7, because you have an even exponent, you're going to get 2 negative signs, and a negative times a negative is a positive. If we had 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 negative signs, we would end up with a negative solution. I'll leave it to you to go back and check the previous video if you're unclear about that rule. Again, pausing the video, try this on your own. I'm going to assume you've done that. We've got 3 6/11ths multiplied together. 6 times 6 is 36. Times 6 again is 216. Notice there are 3 negative signs, so I know my answer is going to be a negative answer. 11 times 11 is 121. 121 times 11 is 1331. Notice, again, I have left off my negative sign, so I'm going to add that in right now. Here I've got 4 of them. Since there's 4 negative signs, I know my answer is going to be positive. 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64, times 4 is 256. 7 times 7 is 49. 49 times 7 is 343. 343 times 7 gives me 2401. Remember, since there's 4 of these, I know my solution is going to be positive. Last one, this is the one that causes people trouble. Notice that there are 2 of what's inside of the parentheses. Notice the negative sign is not in the parentheses, therefore I only have 1 of those. 5 times 5 is 25, 12 times 12 is 144, and I stick the negative out front. Now probably you would write that without the parentheses in there as just -25 over 144. That's not too bad, right? Let's put this into some longer order of operations problems. Just like in the previous video, I'm going to start off with one that's fairly simple. If I have -3 to the 4th, this is one that people tend to mess up very easily because they tend to think there are 4 negative signs. There are not 4 negative signs, there are only 4 3s. This is going to be a -81. 4 squared is 16. Be very, very cautious about that spot. I put this problem in here specifically to review this issue. Lots and lots and lots of people are going to have trouble with that. I change it to plus and negative, and you get negative 97. Here's a second one. Again, I recommend pausing this and trying it on your own. I'm going to keep right on going. I see negative 3 to the 5th. Because there are 5 negative signs in this problem, I know I'm going to get a negative answer. This is negative 243. Notice I now have 3 squared is also 9. Using order of operations, I've got to do the multiplication next, and then I'll subtract that, giving me So we're just going to practice a few order of operations problems. I've given special attention to some things that might be difficult for students. For example, in here, I'd recommend you pause this, try it on your own before you hear what the tricky spot is. Hopefully you've already done that. And now I can tell you that a lot of people struggle with this negative 3 to the 4th because they think that there are 4 negative signs, when in fact there are only 4 3s. This is a negative 81. Now most people are okay with the 4 squared being 16, but just keep in mind that in order for this to be a positive 81, both the 3 and the negative sign would have to be in parentheses. I would change that to plus negative and get a negative 97. Again, here's another one that tends to cause people some trouble. I'm going to recommend that you pause it. I'm also going to assume you've already done that. Negative 3 to the 5th has 5 negative signs, so this is going to be a negative 81. 3 squared is a 9. Order of operations says do the multiplication next, and then we subtract those numbers. Again, the purpose here is to have us thinking about what these negative signs do with even and odd exponents. Here's one. Well, let's see. This is going to be a negative 16 divided by 4 times. Notice here I have 3 1/2. That's 1/2 times 1/2, which is 1/4. 1/4 times 1/2 is 1/8. There's only one negative sign. So when I do this, I get my negative 16. I get my negative 1/8. Order of operations says to divide next and get a negative 4 and multiply last. Negative 4 over 1 times negative 1/8 is positive 4 over 8, which then is 1/2. Last one for you. Remember this long division bar acts as a grouping symbol, so I need to do what's on top, do what's on bottom, and divide last. Since I'm dividing last, I can actually simplify the top and bottom at the same time. On the top, I'm going to do the negative 3 to the 3rd and get a negative 27. On the bottom, I'm going to do my negative 2 to the 4th, which is going to be negative 16. Tricky spot again. There are 4 2's, only one negative sign. On the top, then, I'm going to add that and get my negative 22. And then I'm going to add the bottom. Negative 16 plus 5 is negative 11. Together, negative 22 over negative 11 gives me a positive 2. Again, the purpose of this video is just to highlight some spots that are trouble spots and to give us an opportunity to talk about those a little more closely. Hopefully it's been something that's been helpful to you. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you leave us a comment in the comment section. Make sure you hit that like button, ring that bell to turn on notifications, and surely subscribe so that you can catch everything new that's coming from Nunley Math. Thank you guys very much. You all take care of yourselves, all right?